Welcome to Sisters of Crime Australia and Murder Monday, when authors talk about their crime craft. I'm Karina Kilmore, a crime writer, a journalist and a volunteer with Sisters in Crime. We've been celebrating women's crime writing since 1991. Before I introduce Kylie Kaden, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to all Indigenous Australians and their elders, past, present and emerging. Kylie, welcome.
Lovely to be here, Karina.
We last spoke at a Sisters in Crime panel in Melbourne called Domestic Noir Goes West, way back in 2019 BC, before COVID.
Yes, and nothing much has happened since then. Nothing. Nothing at all.
So it's just lovely to have you back again. You're a self-declared book junkie, have an honours degree in psychology, and now have 4 novels to your credit. But almost a decade ago, you achieved what many aspiring writers dream of. Your manuscript was plucked from the Random House slush pile. That book, Missing You, was translated internationally and won critical acclaim. More recently, your books have turned to the dark side. That's what we love at Sisters in Crime. With your domestic thrillers, The Day the Lies Began, and your new novel, One of Us, which is out this month. And all of this has been achieved while raising 3 boys. Before we start with the questions, can you please give us your elevator pitch for One of Us?
Thank you for that welcome, Karina. Yes, One of Us. It's set amongst the tall hedges of a gated affluent community called Appletree Creek, and it starts with a scene that's pretty horrific with a rich white bloke bleeding out on his lovely floorboards in his little mansion, with his beautiful wife looking on with blood all over her hands. So, you know, just to start things going. At this stage, the reader doesn't know who the victim is, whether the wife is shell-shocked because she witnessed a horrible event or whether she was guilty of it herself. So then we get into the whys and the, you know, who actually was attacked and what the reasoning was behind that. So a lot of, you know, secrets are revealed in this little gated community, and we find the truth of that day. Yeah.
Oh, I love a crime on the first page. Fantastic. Now let's get to our questions.
Mm-hmm.
Why is crime such an appealing genre?
Oh, who doesn't love a good bit of a mystery, a whodunit? They're never boring. I think it's true that readers can tolerate, you know, awful people and, you know, neurotic people, but boring people, not so much. So at least in crime, there's always those extreme emotions, which we love. And I think, you know, from the safety of our own lounge rooms, we can, you know, explore all these, you know, extreme emotions. So that's what I love about crime.
Yeah. What's the hardest part about writing a novel?
Oh, besides the backache and, you know, never doing any exercise, being sedentary. The thing I struggle with, Karina, is not having the fresh eyes on your own work too often, unless you put it in the drawer for a few months and come back, and trying to kind of assess your work through a fresh reader's eyes when you've read it to death. I find that yeah, a little bit challenging. Sticking with it, the structure I think can often be you know, more important than I think people guess. They look at the sentences and making sure it all sounds lovely, but I think having that pace and making sure you keep and hold a reader's attention for, you know, 80 or 100,000 words can be a challenge. So yes,
there's a lot of things that are hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who's your favourite crime fiction character?
Crime fiction character. Oh, I probably don't have too many. I don't read too many series. I used to love Patricia Cornwell growing up, you know, with, yeah, with, you know, the pathology and the or like that was probably one of the series that I did stick with. I've probably kind of gotten a little bit soft in my old age once having kids. I read less of the, you know, chopping up people kind of stories and more of the domestic noirs. And I love, you know, Leanne Moriarty and Sally Hepworth and Jane Harper and all those sorts of writers that look behind the crime and the relationships that cause those, you know, those events to occur. I don't really have a specific character. I'll have to find one.
What's the hardest thing that you've had to write?
Well, this novel, One of Us, I love exploring a particular event from different perspectives, from the young, from the old, from, you know, two people in a couple, and trying to explore all of those options. I think my publisher was thinking I was being a bit too ambitious with the different point of views. So we pulled all that back, and I think trying to rein in all my ideas sometimes can be difficult. Yeah, but in terms of the actual content, I would say writing about perhaps trauma or events that I haven't experienced. I've had a pretty sheltered, lucky life. So I am drawing on the experience of others and research and a bit of experience as a psychologist, just to make sure I'm sensitive about the issues of victims of crime and things like coercive control in a marriage and that sort of thing, which I haven't fortunately experienced myself, because they are issues that I think are important to be accessible in you know, commercial fiction, but not to the degree that they're, you know, they're not sensitive to people's you know, own emotions. Yeah.
Tell us something not in your book about a main character.
Oh, well, as I said, I did cut back the point of views for One of Us. So we're stuck with Gertie and Rachel, which are the two women that have got the dodgy husbands that potentially have perhaps knocked one of them off. So there is a lot of stuff. I think I went through 2 or 3 drafts of changing the point of view, changing the tense, chopping out a few of the secondary characters. So there's probably quite a lot of detail that hasn't got through. A specific thing, I just don't want to give too much away about what you will find out. There's a lot about Gertie, who's the more frazzled mum in One of Us, that a lot of you know, mum moments of, you know, sticking keys in the freezer and burning her hair on the on the hairdryer and the, you know, straightening iron, all those sort of clumsy things that perhaps came across a little bit too mumsy, but I think made her a real person and a flawed mum. So yeah, a lot of that kind of stuff, which is more about motherhood than the actual narrative that we were looking for.
It's a great balance. Yeah. Oh, how much of you is in one of your characters? Speaking of mum characters.
A little bit of Gertie in me, not much of Rachel. She's the other mum that's a bit more polished and you know, manicured. Yeah, people say that my first novel, Losing Kate, had Frankie, the main protagonist in that, is a lot like me. She was a, you know, young flawed girl looking, you know, starting out a life and renovating an old Queenslander, and you know, I may have done that perhaps in my time. So I think everything that you view as an author is through the lens of your own experience. So those little nuances that you may put onto characters are all part of you. And I think the more in my kind of the books that I enjoy and the way I write is that the more of those little human moments and human observations that we see and share with the reader, I think that makes it easier to connect with the story, makes the people more accessible and real. So I think there's probably more than we like to admit.
Fantastic. How much of a profile do you do for each character before you write? Or maybe you don't do one.
I used to be a big pantser, as they call it, or organic writer, I think is a nicer way of saying it. I plotted more just for efficiency as I've gone along, and there's good and bad with that. I think it's more efficient, but it's probably not as fun. But I think there's less, scrapping of stuff that, isn't going to make the cut. So I guess there's good and bad. I'm not one of those people that sits down and says what they have for breakfast and if they're a morning shower or, all of that kind of detail. I accept that really does flesh out people in their minds. I probably write myself into the characters by, tapping away and kind of getting to know them. And then I go back with further drafts and say, oh, that's not really what he'd say. I know him a bit better now, and he's not going to do that. So yeah, just the broader experience, the little bits come with time, I think.
Yeah. When and how do you work out plot twists and red herrings?
Well, with this one and the one I've just finished, book 5, which is out next year, my husband bought me a whiteboard and he's a tax lawyer. He's very analytical and I'm not so much. And I'm not visual. I don't need a whiteboard. It's all in my brain. But he's like, hang on. So if this happens there and this goes there, then, then why would she go and do that? And that we've done for the last book before. But obviously if you get to that scene and you think, oh, that's not really working for me, it's, I'm not sure they do that, then I guess we flick it around. But the main twists I definitely build into the foundation and stick with it. Yeah.
How many drafts do you do before you hand it in?
Oh, so many drafts that I'm sick of it and I just want to get the thing out of my life. So look, it's hard to say. At least 3 or 4, but in that draft I obviously go back and forth and change my mind about something. I have to go back, and all the stuff that I foreshadowed about, that's gone as well. So it's hard to say. It's a working document. I do think it's important to have, after those few initial drafts, is to have a point to your draft. Like in this scene, I'm going to strengthen all my verbs, for example, just so that you're not just reading it just to make it sound better. You kind of have a specific goal. I'm going to make sure I'm, showing and not telling so much in this, key scene. And that helps me focus on what I'm actually trying to achieve and not just reading on cache memory and just, blah, 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 this happens, this, yeah, I know this. I find that kind of focuses my drafts.
Great tip. How do you write about violence?
I try to avoid it. I sometimes think, less is more with my books don't have a lot of gratuitous sort of violence in them. It's more about the psychological aspects and that sort of the conflict that led to that scene. So yes, it's very shallow and brief, and it's more about the emotional experience of that scene and the fallout, I suppose.
Yeah. And our last question for today: how would you get away with murder?
Oh, I'm sure we were probably all asking ourselves this in isolation or lockdowns when we're stuck in our home with lots of our family for longer than is natural. I can't say I've plotted too many real life murders, but I've got a pathologist. The days the lies began. My last book had a foot wash up on a beach and these sorts of things that I needed a pathologist's view on. And I kind of had that discussion with him, and he said, you crime writers, you focus on, hiding the body, but you've got to hide the crime, not the body. So that's always stuck with me. I thought, if I've ever stuck with the body, I'm not going to worry so much about it. I'm going to try and, set the scene to be, a bit more favourable for me. But that's as far as I've gone with that so far.
I like that strategy, though. Hide the crime, don't worry about the body.
That's right.
Kylie,
hopefully I'll never need to use it.
Hopefully. Kylie, thanks for joining us today on Murder Monday.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.